Of all the players on the Blue Jackets that took steps forward this year, Kirill Marchenko arguably took the biggest step of all of them. We're going to discuss on today's Locked on Blue Jackets.
You're Locked on Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked on Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked on Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. Now, today we're going to talk about Kirill Marchenko. We are going to talk about how his season went. We're going to talk about the steps forward that he took. Was he, as many people are saying, the MVP of this team? I know that I just did a whole episode on how Zach Werenski is the MVP of this team, but we are approaching other options, right? I think it's fair to say that Kirill Marchenko is in the conversation, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what next year could bring for Kirill Marchenko. You know, he hit 30 goals this year. Can he hit 40? And we're also going to look a little bit at the best option to play the other side of Sean Monahan, because I think it's fair to say that Monahan and Marchenko are going to be stapled together forever. But who's the best option to play on the left wing for them? So let's get started by just talking about Kirill Marchenko's season, because career highs in everything, massively so. 31 goals, 43 assists, 74 points. That is a 32-point jump from last season's season high. In his first 3 years in the league, he's gone from 21 goals, 4 assists, 25 points, to 23 goals, 19 assists, 42 points, to 31 goals, 43 assists, 74 points. So I know that he came to the NHL a little bit later than most rookies, as Russians typically do. He was 21, if I'm doing the math right, or 22 when he came over for his first season, the 22-23 season. Or maybe he's 22 years old. 22 years old. Yeah. Math is even harder than normal when it's date of birth. So, you know, he was a little bit older, but he's still only 24. Only in his third year, is signed to an absolutely incredibly team-friendly deal that is almost certainly going to go up 10 times the amount, maybe not 10 times the amount. He's currently making $3.8 million for the next 2 seasons after this year, and after that, he's still an RFA. So my guess is that for the 2027-28 season, is when you're going to get the big Marchenko contract. And like, obviously he needs to follow up his growth with more, but as of right now, an almost a point a game player, 30 goals for just under 4 million is pretty great, right? He's the second highest paid forward on the team right now, which feels a little bit insane. But he is definitely earned that contract, and also, like, you could have given him double that contract, and I think it probably would have been worth it, right? Like, what was it? It was 3.8 for 3 years. You could have given him 7 million for 6 years, and I would have been more than okay with that, or 7.2, 7.4, whatever the actual double is. Like, I would have given him 8x8 and been more than happy, right? Don Waddell wanted to go the bridge deal. That's fine. It's a problem for future us. He was incredible this year. Like, and I've been a huge Marchenko fan basically since he got here. You know, he was, let's say, one-dimensional in his rookie season, which seems a little bit harsh, but extremely funny stat line of, like, I think he made it to 18 goals before he got his first assist. Just so funny. Finished with 21 goals and 4 assists, which I believe is like the highest like the that's been the highest ratio of goals to assists, I think, since Brandon Perry had like 20 goals and 2 assists back in like 2015. Just an incredible stat line. He's not just a goal scorer though, right? Last season he developed his playmaking. He had 23 goals, which was an increase on his career high, and he went from 4 assists to 19 assists, so almost 5 times the amount of assists, almost doubled his career high in points. This year, again, adds another dimension to his game. For me, has become one of the better two-way wingers in the game, right? Like, I'm not saying that he is the most defensively responsible player that, we have ever seen in the world, but he is extremely, extremely strong offensively. And here's the thing, is when you're strong offensively, you can use that to make up for any kind of defensive mishaps. But he's pretty good in his own zone as well. Like, he's not necessarily a Selke candidate, I don't think. And people get weird about saying that wingers can be Selke candidates, but I think for me, like, Mitch Marner is the ideal defensive winger, like, Selke candidate, right? Marchenko is more of a goal scorer than Marner, but the fact that he just creates so much offense, and there was a lot of talk this season about, like, how good was Sean Monahan, that he created all of that offense regardless of who was on his wing, right? So the season started, it was Chinikov, Monahan, Marchenko. They basically bulldozed every other team in terms of, like, creating offense. Chinikov gets injured, they swap Boronkov in. Same thing. But the interesting thing is, Monahan gets injured, and this is no shade to Monahan, because I think, again, he did an incredible job, and we'll talk about him in a couple episodes' time. Monahan gets injured, you swap Fantilli in, and that top line with Marchenko just keeps on buzzing, right? And so I'm not going to sit here and say that the Kirill Marchenko was explicitly the only reason that that top line was good, but I do think a lot of credit has been given to Sean Monahan, and I think you need to probably give some credit to Marchenko as well, because there are 5 lines on the Blue Jackets that played 5 forward line combos that played more than 100 minutes. Marchenko was a part of 3 of them, and the first 2, the two Monahan Marchenko lines, expected goals percentage of 64.9 and then 58.1. Just he's a rock star. He's a monster. If we shuffle the slider around a little bit, you add more lines, and none of them are as dominant as those 2. So I think, yes, Monahan was a big influence on this team, but I think Marchenko also deserves some credit for the way that but the interesting thing about Monahan is that Marchenko, is that he drags play and also he finishes it, right? Like, sometimes, and I'm not going to name any names here, but sometimes you get players that are extremely good at starting the offense and they need somebody else to finish it, right? Or you get players that don't really create a bunch of their own offense, but by God, they'll finish it. Marchenko seems to just kind of create his own. He's like, okay, well, I'm just going to, and you can see this. This is kind of a combination eye test and stat test thing of, like, you can see it in the games that he plays, right? Kirill Marchenko sometimes is one of those players that I'm like, okay, he's got the puck. Something good is probably going to happen, right? If Kent Johnson has the puck, I'm like, something exciting is going to happen. If Marchenko has the puck, something good is going to happen. And those are 2 very different things. Like, I am a huge, huge Kent Johnson fan, and so many young players took huge steps forward. We talk about Fantilli taking steps forward. We talk about Kent Johnson. Kosolinja developing into a really good 2-way center. For me, Marchenko took the biggest step of all of them, by far. Led the forwards in scoring, led the team in goals. I think Adam Fantilli tied him late at the end there when he just decided to go bonkers and score like 6 goals in his last 5 games or whatever. But for me, Marchenko was far and away the best forward on this team for many, many reasons, but specifically just for the way that he just kind of does it all, right? I have no issues with anything that Kirill Marchenko does. Like I was looking at his stats and I was like, oh, okay. Looking for something that could be, like, oh, okay, well, he needs to improve on this, he needs to improve on that. But like he shoots the puck like a maniac. The puck goes in, like he clearly knows how to do assists as well. Because he had more assists than he had goals, even scoring 30 goals. He had almost 50 assists, I think it was. His shooting percentage isn't like insanely high. His shooting percentage this season was 15%, which is high, but not like overly so. I don't think it's not where I'm like, oh, that's going to come back down to earth. It's not like he's shooting at 20, 25%. He's getting into the right places. His on ice shooting attempt is good. His on ice expected goals is good. Like he's creating a lot and he's not giving up a ton at the other end. So like I have nothing to say about Marchenko that is like even a little bit critical, really. Like I came into this episode being like, man, what does he have to improve on? Like what is the next step for Kirill Marchenko to hit that next level? And we'll talk about that in more detail in a second here. But like the short answer is I don't think there is anything that like Marchenko specifically needs to work on. Like I'm like, what are his weaknesses? He obviously has them, but I can't figure out what they are because it feels like anything that he is weak at, he has managed to compensate for by being extremely good in like 3 other areas, right? Let's take a quick break. And then when we get back, what we'll do is we'll talk about what next season holds for Kirill Marchenko. How can he continue to grow as a player in the way that he has grown over the past 3 seasons? So we'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I want to tell you about FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you're going to get $250 in bonus bets if that $5 bet wins. I love that FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking the money line, whether it's diving into player props, 3-pointers, steals, assists. FanDuel has a billion different ways to bet on your favorite kind of player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Once again, if you join FanDuel.com now, place your first $5 bet, and that $5 bet wins, you're going to get $250 in bonus bets that you can spend on whatever you want. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and join today to claim your $250 in bonus bets. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're talking about Kirill Marchenko today. Let's talk about what's next for Marchenko, right? Because every year he has added a new aspect to his game. Every year he's gotten better. He came as a goal scorer, scored 20 goals as a rookie. Next season, works on his playmaking. This season became a really good two-way responsible winger that is extremely strong defensively and offensively. Like, what's next for Marchenko? Is it just to level up everything? Like, in my little side thing here, I put Marchenko scored 30. Can he hit 40? Like, what is Marchenko's ceiling? Because he might, like, 40 goals feels like that doesn't even feel like too much of a stretch, right? What was he? He scored 31 this season, I think was the final total. I should know this by now. Yeah, 31 goals. So he missed 3 games due to injury. So if we extrapolate that, he probably should have scored 32 if he played all 82. And also, again, he was part of the team when they went through that phase where no one could score a goal. Like they got shut out 6 times in 14 games or something after the outdoor game. Like it was such a weird outlier that like I don't know. Obviously, I don't want to sit here and be like that won't happen again because the weird things happen, right? But for a team that scored more goals than any other team of 5-on-5, they also, I believe, got shut out more times than any other team. They, I believe, were shut out 8 or 9 times this season. And then they also had like 15 or 16 games where they scored 6 goals or more. Like, just a wild up and down team. I was going to say wildly inconsistent, but I think inconsistent feels a little bit too far. But is that what they need from Kirill Marchenko? Because here's the thing: is Kirill Marchenko, to me, felt like one of the more consistent players on the team, right? Yes, he was streaky because goal scorers are streaky, right? Sometimes they go 5-6 games without scoring a goal. He did finish the season a little bit cold. His last goal was April 1st. He scored a hat trick against Nashville, and then didn't score again for the rest of the season. So he went the final 9 games without scoring a goal, which is, again, that does kind of happen. He had 4 assists in that stretch, so it's not like he was like completely pointless in that time. But going from scoring a hat trick to then scoring 0 goals in the next 9 games, like, again, that's a really goal scorers thing to do, right? He had 6 goals in 4 games and then nothing in 9. And then before that, he had no goals in 5 and then no goals in 4. Like, he was a little bit streaky. Not in a way that makes me worried, but in a way that I would like to see him avoid. So I guess that's my answer for next season, is I'd like to see consistency. Goal scorers are going to go 4 or 5 games without a goal, right? But I don't want to see like 10-game goalless stretches, 12-game goalless stretches like that. That stretch towards the end of the season, I do wonder if the broken jaw was maybe a little bit of a factor. I don't think so, because it clearly didn't stop him. Before that, he missed, I think, a grand total of 3 games in 21 days with a broken jaw, and then obviously had the cage on, or the bubble, for however long. But that's my overarching thing here. We figured it out. I was like, what does Kirill Marchenko need to do next season to get better? And the answer is consistency. Be a little bit more consistent. If instead of, like I said, a 9-game goalless drought to finish the season, if he'd scored 2 or 3 goals in that goalless drought, if he'd scored, what did I say? And then he had a 5-game goalless drought. If he'd scored 1 there, if he'd scored 1 in that 4-game goalless drought before that, he had a 6-game goalless drought mid-January, like 2 goals there. He had a 5-game goalless drought, or a 6-game goalless drought at the beginning of December. 5-game goalless drought mid-November. 4-game goalless streak end of October. Again, nothing to worry about because he scored 30 goals. He was on pace for just under half a goal a game, which is still pretty good. That's basically a goal every other game, right? Give or take. But I do think that we can get closer to a goal, like 1 goal every, or like 2 goals every 3 games, I think is what I would want. Like, scoring at about 2/3 of a goal a game. So yeah, 2 goals every 3 games would give him closer to 50, 55 goals a game. That to me feels like the sweet spot for Kirill Marchenko. And I've said he scored 30. Can he hit 40? I do think he can hit 40. I think he can hit 50. I think Kirill Marchenko can score 50 goals in this league. He keeps getting better, and obviously that jump that he has experienced the first three seasons of his NHL career, like that'll flatten out, right? He's not going to continually get, like, what was it? His first season, he had 25 points, and then he jumped, 17-point increase, I think, and then a 30-point increase between year 2 and year 3. So, like, I don't think necessarily we're going to follow that of going from a 15-point increase to a 30-point increase to a 45-point increase, because that would be 120 points next season, which, hey, knock on wood, maybe he does. But, I think we should be looking at Kirill Marchenko to be an 80 or 90-point player. Maybe flirt with 100. If not next season, then the season after that. Like, that to me feels like reasonable growth. And it also but it does feel like that's maybe 100 points might be his ceiling. which if that is his ceiling, that's a pretty great ceiling, right? I don't know off the top of my head how many players hit 100 points this season, but it wasn't a lot of them, right? If I can pull up the regular season stats and not the playoff stats, only 6 players scored 100 points this season. Kucherov, McKinnon, Draisaitl, Pasternak, Marner, McDavid. That's it. Kyle Connor got close with 97. Jack Eichel got close with 94. I think Kirill Marchenko is a 100-point player in this league. If you get him another winger, because as good as the Monahan-Marchenko duo is, I do feel like that they could have been even better. Like the Chinakhov had that line with Chinakhov was great. That line with Voronkov was great. I don't think either of those two guys are the long-term fit on that line. I thought putting Jenna there at the end of the season was fine, but if you can find and the kicker is, like Gaudreau would have been incredible as the third person on that line, right? Like a Gaudreau Monahan Marchenko line would have been out of this world good. But they need to find someone who can play with Monahan, and they need to find someone who can play with Marchenko, and also someone who can be a little bit more than just the third guy on a line, right? Because at the minute, Monahan and Marchenko are driving that line. And if you can find someone who is on their level or, maybe even better, as some of the guys that we're going to talk about in a second here, I think you do that, right? Because imagine if you could get Marchenko just a playmaker of any kind. A consistent playmaker, someone who can just get him the puck and he does the last bit. So he doesn't have to do all of the offense himself. I think we're going to see him, take even bigger steps forward than we saw him take this season. So we'll talk about a couple of the guys that I was thinking about as this option in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're talking about Kirill Marchenko and who should play on the other side of Sean Monahan with Marchenko. Because to me, it's not like the biggest need that this team has. Like, to me, you have to find Fantilli another winger before you have to find Monahan and Marchenko another winger. But the team has the cap space. The team has flexibility. They've got roster holes. Looking at the roster kind of as it stands now, like the best person to be that winger is probably Kent Johnson, right? But I don't love that. Like, I like Johnson and Monahan. I like Johnson and Marchenko. Obviously, Monahan and Marchenko is a great combination, but I really like Fantilli with Johnson. So who else do you look at in terms of who plays on that line? Like, Chinakhov was fine there, but I don't know that he's got a future with this team. Voronkov was good there, but I don't know that he is a top line player. Especially when you look at, he looked much better playing more his speed, which was kind of on the third line with Sillinger and Olivier. Jenna is an option that I don't hate, but again, I do think that they deserve someone better than. This is maybe mean to Boone Jenner, but Boone Jenner is always going to be just the third guy on that line, right? But if you can find someone that stands up with Monahan and Marchenko instead of just being the third guy on the line, I think that could very well be one of the best lines in hockey. And there's a couple of options that I have here. None of them are like new necessarily. The top choice obviously is Mitch Marner, and we're going to keep banging this drum until it turns out that he's staying in Toronto or he's going somewhere else. Obviously, Toronto is getting tense at the minute. They were up 3-0 on the Ottawa Senators and then let them back into the series. And is this going to be the same as every other year, right? Are they gonna be fit? If they do you break up that core? Does Mitch Marner go somewhere else? Do they trade William Nylander? Do they, break it up and start from scratch? I don't think they completely break it up. I don't think Nylander goes anywhere, but Mitch Marner feels like a very achievable target. And I think you put him on that line. We talked a little bit about Marchenko being defensively responsible and like Marner being the goal there. Marchenko should aim to be a Marner type player, right? We talked about he had 100 points this season. It's a contract year. He's clearly playing for it. But Monahan Marchenko is something that is extremely fun for me. Mana is extremely responsible defensively. He is an excellent playmaker. I don't buy this nonsense that he's a regular season performer and not a playoff performer, because he's almost a point a game in the playoffs. And I think he would gel really well. I think he and Monahan would gel really well. It'll be expensive. Like, you're looking at 13 or 14 million for the next 8 years, or probably 7 years, unless you trade for his rights. The team can afford it, but that is a big contract to hand out. So I can understand if Don Waddell is kind of wary on that. The other option is someone that I've talked about a little bit, but have not really dug into. Mostly because I assumed that he would be staying with the team that he's on right now, and that's Nikolai Ehlers, who is allegedly not thrilled with the concept of signing long-term in Winnipeg. Now, he's 29 years old. He was the 9th overall pick back in 2014. Only played 69 games this season, had 63 points. But he's coming off of an injury, I believe. And he's not putting up Mitch Marner-like numbers, right? But he is pretty reliably good for 20 to 25 goals a season. Somewhere between 60 and 70 points if all things go well and he plays the full 82. Obviously he missed a bunch of time with injury this year. He's injured at the minute, so he's not playing in the playoffs. His last game was April 12th. So he hasn't played any of the playoff games for Winnipeg so far. And it sounds like he is, like I said, he's not thrilled with the idea of signing long-term in Winnipeg. I don't know what his contract looks like at the minute. That feels like a thing that I can look up real quick. But if you can get him, so he's making $6 million a year at the minute. I would very happily pay that and probably a little bit more. Again, cap's going up. I was looking to see what that initial contract length was, but if Winnipeg can re-sign him, they absolutely should. So we signed a 7-year, $6 million contract. And it's about to be a UFA. If you can get, if you miss out on Mana, I know we've talked about Brock Besser being a potential option, and Alex Tuck is a potential option. But if you can get someone like Nikolai Ehlers, that feels again like a pretty. If Nikolai Ehlers is your consolation prize, that feels pretty good. I don't know whether it's doable. It's more affordable than Mana, which is maybe a little bit more palatable. Especially when you look at some of the players that the Blue Jackets have, they're going to need contract extensions in the next couple of years. We look at Kirill Marchenko, for example. Adam Fantilli is going to be coming off his ELC next summer. Ken Johnson's going to need new contracts. In a couple of years, Zach Werenski's going to need a new contract. All of these moving parts. I can understand if the team is wary to spend $14 million on Mitch Marner. Ehlers feels like a pretty good consolation prize. And it's, again, I just assumed he was going to stay in Winnipeg. But talking to, a couple of friends, poking at the bear that is the Winnipeg Jets in the playoffs, again, I wonder if this team that is so good in the regular season and can't get it done in the playoffs, I don't think they necessarily blow the team up, but I could think that he maybe doesn't want to sign long term if he thinks that there is an option for playoff success somewhere else. I think it'll be a case of he doesn't want to sign in Winnipeg, as opposed to Winnipeg doesn't want to keep him, because Winnipeg obviously wants to keep him. But I feel like if he was going to stay, probably he would have extended by now. Maybe I'll be wrong. Again, I've been wrong before and I'll be wrong again. But that is a player that is going to be interesting to keep an eye on, especially as kind of the winger free agent market starts to settle itself. Obviously, there is there's Marner, there's Besser, there's Ehlers. There's some big free agent names kind of floating around out there. And I think Ehlers could be a really interesting option for that top line for Monahan and Marchenko. was going to finish off with a letter grade, but I think everyone knows what it is. Like, obviously Marchenko gets an A. Led forwards in scoring, led the team in goals, tied with Adam Fantilli. 30-point increase on last year. Like, the vibes are good. By all accounts, great teammate, great guy to hang around with, which it shouldn't impact your grade, but he's already getting an A. Why not? Like, why not add that in for good measure, right? He is a fun guy to be a Blue Jacket, right? And it feels like he enjoys being a Blue Jacket. It feels like he enjoys being here. Like, he loves to play the game. He's always smiling, and that's not nothing, right? So, really, really looking forward to seeing Marchenko be a Blue Jacket for at least the next 10 years, knock on wood. But as of right now, yeah, it's an easy A for me on Marchenko. And that's kind of what I've got for today. Tomorrow, we'll probably talk a little bit about that left wing top six hole that we have. I've been meaning to talk about it for a couple of days now. So we'll talk about that. We'll check in with the World Championships because there's a handful of Blue Jackets that are going to be going to the World Championships, which is fun. So we'll check in there as well. Thank you for listening to this episode, for making it your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I've been your host, Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets, both on Twitter. And you can email me if you want at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.